Welcome. Listen to this next Agile Vocalist blogcast.
So I'm curious about one thing, and this is more for the novice music audience, and you might not have an answer to it. Is why is it that we usually know the name of the band or the singer or the song, or we've heard it before, but why is it that writers and composers and arrangers, like, unless you're a musician that's diving into those charts, you just don't know who that person is. So it's not just unrecognized women, but it's something about the way that our culture markets and sells music, and it goes way back. I don't know do you have any insight into that one?
No, I agree. And I think we're shallow. We like pop culture.
We do.
but some of that, I'll say, I mean, it used to be if you got some sheet music, it used to be when we were a sheet music culture before records and gramophones, you always knew who the composers were.
Right.
Even if the star who made the song famous was there, it was, this was all dictated by, ASCAP was a very powerful union. There were a lot of reasons why? We knew about the composers. Mm-hmm. But at some point we started relating to the songs by the most famous person who did it. And I think people always are like that. What gets under my craw these days is if you look up a song that was written by somebody else, mm-hmm. and you just go online and they have the lyrics, but they'll say as written by Frank Sinatra or Ella Fitzgerald or Etta James, or there actually is some copyright issues there and publishing issues that it would be, it's kind of a shame, but they do. You have to dig around to find those things out.
Yeah.
That being said, I always urge my singing students to find it, who wrote this song.
And as I've dived into, some blues, it's like none of it's Eric Clapton's, and Led Zeppelin stole a whole lot, right? I mean, it's just really kind of shocking.
Yeah.
And Aerosmith was on there too, taking and reworking, and it's just not very original. I mean, it's shocking when you start to figure out who wrote songs.
Yeah, and there was a lot of, let's be clear, a lot of white appropriation of Black music.
Yeah.
And those it's a kind of interesting little side story, and I won't bore you people with it. But there were a lot of a lot of those British bands kind of rediscovered our blues and roots music because these two guys, Horst Lippmann and his friend Franz, somebody started bringing them over for this series of jazz concerts out of World War II, where they had been starved, especially in Germany, where it was illegal to have jazz or blues records. So, they were so hungry for the music, and they started inviting them, having these concerts. And because it was Germany, let me tell you that these concerts were filmed for German TV, and they were in perfect, pristine condition. So, and then later they started bringing in blues artists, and they discovered a lot of the blues artists that we in America had forgotten, Muddy Waters and Willie Dixon, and and started bringing them over. And once they started bringing them over, they filmed all of that. And so these young guys were watching it on TV and went to the concerts all over Europe. And a lot of the, certainly everybody in the Rolling Stones did, and the Animals, they were just sitting at the feet of them. And they met a lot of these blues artists, and they tried to be, some of them were more respectful, but the white kids who heard these songs just assumed that their band because everybody was listening to the Beatles, who were doing a lot of their own songs.
Right.
And they assumed that all those, when the Rolling Stones did Little Red Rooster, they just assumed that they'd written it.
You want to talk about blues as a woman? And
Right.
So I guess you started that in 2018, is that right?
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay.
While I was doing the Wild Women a Song show,
Yeah.
And because I was a literature major in college, I am kind of a research geek a little bit. And as I'm digging into especially the Ida Cox, who wrote Wild Women Don't Sing the Blues, and Ma Rainey and Alberta Hunter, and I started, which we were talking about in the Wild Women of Song show, but I started thinking, this is really the story I would love to tell. I also knew that I didn't want to do it like the last show where I am the singer. I knew I wanted it to be an ensemble piece. I knew that it's really a Black woman story. I sing I sing the Sophie Tucker and Janis Joplin songs and a few others, but I wrote the show and created it for all the incredible artists that perform with me.
Oh, nice.
And that show, and because I had done Wild Women and I finally understood how hard it is to mount something like that, I actually spent a full year grant writing, and I got a lot of beautiful support from a lot of foundations to do it. If you're a blues lover, I am. The first image that is going to come into your mind is a guy and his guitar,
Right.
And I love a lot of those guys and their guitars. I'm a big fan. But when you really come down to listen to the women and check out where they were and what they added to it, it was the women who put this music on the map. There's no doubt about it. And there were so many reasons why that was true. One is because the recording, we started to switch over to have gramophone records, but gramophone records up until that time were still kind of novelties, and people, like ordinary people, wouldn't necessarily have them around. And but you had opera, you had Caruso, you had Borscht Belt comics, you had, things like that, but it wasn't the way you heard music necessarily. And this one guy had this idea, because he was seeing that what was tearing up the tent shows and the vaudeville acts that were going all the way from the South in these caravans and tents, up to the South, were these amazing women blues singers, Sippy Wallace and Ma Rainey and Victoria Spivey. And and they had big voices and they really put a song across. And of course, the great Bessie Smith.
Yeah.
And so this guy, had this wonderful idea and tried to sell it to he said, if you put one of those women on a record, you're going to have an entire new audience of record buyers. And finally, somebody took him up on that, and they issued, their first known blues recording. And it did pretty well. And then suddenly the floodgates had opened. Just opened. When Bessie Smith recorded Alberta Hunter's song, Downhearted Blues, and I think that was like 1924. She actually came a little late. It took him a while to get to her. But it sold 780,000 copies in 6 months. And people were running out to buy gramophones just to hear that, because, of course, the amazing thing about a blues singer is that you can't get that on the sheet music. You can't get those moans and those slurs, and it doesn't translate. And the power of the women, is what suddenly it was. Blues, which we didn't even think about musically, suddenly it was what everybody had to have and wanted the latest blues record. And it was the women by far who were driving those record sales. and internationally, so women put blues on the map. But I will also say that there's a great, Angela Davis wrote a great book about feminism and blues lyrics that is really well worth reading. But, the thing was, I mean, when you think about it, these women were coming off the farm, and the farm, if you were a young Black girl in the South, you pretty much had two options. You were going to live and die on your family's farm, or you're going to work, as somebody's maid, which is just a domestic service, which is just a step up from being a slave, or you were going to marry and, work on his farm, right? There were terrible options. And so for a few of these women to join the show, to join the caravan and leave and join showbiz, this was like you're out. So if you could sing and dance, this was your way out of all of that.
Wow. Yeah.
But also, so that was part of it, but also these women who then started, putting on these fancy clothes and feathers, and these caravans would pull into town. And it was, maybe you lived way out in the Delta, and this was like the big, when this show came to your town, it was like everybody came, that you were so excited, and you saw this woman who had on her furs and her, pretend jewelry, and she gets up there and sings a song that reaches into your heart, but also is singing about, I don't have to take it from you anymore, and I'm going to leave you. These women were singing songs about personal freedom. Blues has always been about freedom, but I think that, freedom just to complain, if nothing else.
Right.
It's no surprise that blues really popped into our cultural consciousness after the emancipation. I mean, suddenly you could express yourself, and you could wander around from town to town.
Yeah.
So seeing the power of these women who were themselves, just a year away from, being somebody who had absolutely no freedom and no choices, and suddenly they're summoning up this image of a woman that you, as a woman in the audience, said, I want to be like that.
Right.
I want to say, well, I'm going to kick up my heels if you don't treat me right, and I'm going to leave you, and I'm going to, suddenly that was a very different topic than popular songs had been talking about. Women traditionally, the songs pre-1915 were about women were sweethearts.
Right.
They were sisters.
Right. They were givers and caretakers and
they
mothers.
They were elevated, subjects. And suddenly, here come these women, and they're drinking and they're smoking and they're fooling around, and they're saying what's good for the, gander is good for the goose, honey. And I don't have to take that. And it was hugely liberating. Yeah. And I think it changed all of us. And I think that's why the blues so deeply speaks to us, even now, since I knew we had been talking so much about women and freedom, that I recently found this song that I have never recorded, and I think I played for a couple of people in my life, that I wrote in the 70s. And can I give you a tiny bit of backstory about it?
Absolutely, please do. If you want. No, please do.
It was the 70s, and let's just say, social and sexual roles were complicated, and we're all trying to figure it out. And I think that I was trying to make a statement about these little shades of patronism, about being in a relationship where, a man is sort of being patronizing.
Yeah.
And, but at the same time, I was involved in a radical therapy group. How about that for an early 70s phrase? And the woman who ran it used to say, and I never forgot this, that every woman should have, she said, you have to have three things. You have to have a couple of friends that you know that no matter what, you could show up on their doorstep in the middle of the night. You have to have $50 saved that's yours, not your husband's. And you have to have something to believe in. And I loved that, and this was really speaking to women who feel trapped or I can't free myself from
a bad marriage, whatever. Yeah, sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I was a pretty young woman, so I wasn't in any situation like that. But here's what I came up with.
Okay, great.
Okay. It's called Liberator. All right. I took a drive to Mendocino. You said you wanted to be free. I had a taste of something good, but baby, you needed it more than me. I found the buskers by the station and offered up some harmony. I gave a man a coin whose palm was stretched. He needed it more than me. What happens to a woman when she's sent away? The road to nowhere isn't paved. At least I've got something I believe in. And I've got $50 saved. So when you talk about it later and you rewrite this history, don't you dare paint yourself my savior. It was not your job to set me free. And don't call yourself my liberator. You needed it more than me.
Oh, that's awesome. What a wonderful story. Thank you. This is my applause. This is how we do applause in the digital age. Most people go like this, but I'm just different. I have some beatnik in my background.
Yeah,
so
clearly.
That's awesome. That's so
Thank
awesome.
you.
Thank you for sharing that. And what is it? What was it? That's called Liberator, you said?
Liberator.
Liberator.
It only exists here in this house and now to your folks.
I've been a student of yours and you've had students and they come back and back. What would you say to someone who, everybody says, oh, I can't sing, which we know is garbage, right? And you hear them, you're like, you've got enough to try. What would you say to someone who's thinking about singing, who, is dabbling around and just too fearful to dive into the creative? What would you say to encourage somebody like that? There's nothing to lose or.
No, I would say that 90% of my students you're describing right here.
Oh, okay. Got it.
I teach a lot of, I call it my 4 starters class.
Yes.
Because a lot of people fit that bill. And it actually, I think we need to be heard. I think people long to be heard. And most people, even though they're afraid to sing in public, sing very loudly in the shower or very loudly in their car, right? And then many students come when they just kind of reach this age in their life where they just say, you know what, I just want to do it and I'm afraid, but I really don't care what anybody thinks about it anymore. Maybe they, had the experience of, your little brother always teased you or somebody told you you couldn't sing and so you stopped, but it feels good.
Yeah.
To let your voice out. I have had a couple of students, and I've been teaching for years, who really were truly tonally challenged or
Mhm.
rhythm challenged, and that's
Mhm.
the harder thing to teach.
Yeah.
But even them, I create a very supportive atmosphere in my class, and we make it so that you feel more and more confident with what you've got and can bring it out.
That's
So
great. That's
do it.
beautiful.
That's what
Yeah.
I say.
Be the best version of you.
Do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, do it, and it feels good. There's been, so many studies about what happens to your brain waves when you're singing or making
Yeah.
music. Like it's like, you know, massage from the inside, or it's a kind of a meditation. It's
Uh-huh.
really good at calming us. Interestingly, as hard as it is to teach this way, via Zoom during the
Yes.
pandemic,
Yes.
my classes have been packed.
Packed. Yeah.
I mean, because I think people more than ever are longing to be heard. Because maybe you'll spend the whole day just talking to you and your cat, and hiding behind a mask and saying hi to some. I mean, right?
Right.
So you
Yeah.
need to be heard, but it's been interesting. I think of it as spiritual. I really do.
So, any closing comments you want to make or share? Anything else?
If I'm speaking to people who want to
Yeah.
let their voices out, whether as a songwriter or a performer or
Mhm.
just as an amateur singer,
Yeah.
do it. Having something we believe in is the thing that warms us all the time. And connecting to things that really spark our joy is so important, especially, hey, the world is crazy. Music is one of the things I think that is keeping the sphere spinning. So more music in your life, and create more music. Sing loudly, sing out of tune. I don't care. Just do it.
That was inspiring. Be sure to listen again soon.